Hi everyone, welcome to WE On Live broadcast from New York City. I'm your host, Susan Tehrani. First, let's take a look at this hour's headlines.
The Ministry of Commerce and Industry is engaged with all stakeholders.
Indian Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal tells Parliament that the government is assessing the impact Trump's tariffs announcements for India, stresses the government will protect the interests of Indian farmers, the MSMEs, and entrepreneurs.
Stay away. Stay away. It's kids. It's children. Children. Stay there.
United Nations office releases video appearing to show gunshots as Palestinians rush for aid.
Foxtrot confirm received.
Received. Moving.
U.S. President's envoy Steve Witkoff meets Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in a bid to salvage Gaza's ceasefire talks and tackle a humanitarian crisis in the Palestinian enclave. The United States says it will deny visa to Palestinian Authority officials accusing the body which governs parts of the Israeli-occupied West Bank of seeking to internationalize its situation with Israel. Ukraine's parliament passes law restoring independence of two anti-corruption bodies, annulling the law passed last week, slashing their powers. The previous law had sparked the worst street protests Ukraine has seen in years. UK's media watchdog says that it's investigating 34 pornography websites over their compliance with new age check requirements to prevent children accessing harmful online content. The probe comes under the new Online Safety Act, which took effect last week. "70 dead, dozens missing, and hundreds of thousands evacuated as floods ravage areas adjoining capital Beijing as rescue operations continue. Beijing officials admit that the gaps in preparation for the deluge The 8.8 magnitude quake that struck Russia's Far East shook nerves but spared the Pacific from a disaster. Yet scientists say the next one, closer to home, might not. The U.S. West Coast, they warned, is silently waiting for a killer wave that could tower 100 feet high. Here's more.
The alarm bells have never rung louder. A massive 8.8 magnitude earthquake rocked Russia's Far East, unleashing tsunami waves and launching urgent warnings across the Pacific. The shallow earthquake damaged buildings and injured several people in the remote Russian region. Over 2 million people in Japan's eastern seaboard were ordered to evacuate. Hawaii readied for surges, but fears of a catastrophe were not realized. and people took a sigh of relief.
I heard the tsunami warning at work, as my workplace is by the beach. My co-workers told me to go back home because I have a small child, and she was waiting at home, so I came to pick her up.
The tremors were strong, especially the first one, which was stronger than the second and third. It's something we have never experienced here. There were many comments from all the people about whether they had felt an earthquake like the one felt yesterday.
The massive quake and tsunami warning once again brought focus on the danger lurking just off the coast of California. Scientists have pinpointed the Cascadia subduction zone, a colossal 600-mile-long fault running from California to Washington, as the epicenter of this existential risk. Here, centuries of pent-up geological tension threaten to snap with unimaginable fury. According to leading seismologists, there is now a 15% chance of a mega earthquake along the Cascadia subduction zone within the next 50 years. This isn't a mere shake and rattle event. It could unleash a 100-foot-high tsunami that would destroy swathes of the US West Coast within minutes. The massive quake in Russia's Far East did not cause much damage, but it rattled the scientific community for good reason. It reminded the world that these plates are active, unstable, and overdue for catastrophe.
The North American plate is like the sponge, and the subducting Pacific plate is like this book. And the average convergence rate between these two plates is like 7 to 8 centimeters per year, so on average. But during the regular times, in most of the time, they are stick together due to friction. So you are changing the shape of the sponge. So the sponge is squeezed, it's being squeezed.
Unlike hurricanes, tsunamis strike with almost no time to flee. A wave spawned in the Pacific could reach the Oregon coastline in under 15 minutes. No chance to evacuate, no time to hesitate, only devastation.
Начался очень сильный камнепад. Мы сначала не поняли, что произошло, просто как будто какая-то пелена из грязи начала сыпаться с вершины острова. Остров сам скалистый. И буквально, наверное, секунд через 20 мы поняли, что это землетрясение, потому что сивичи начали массово прыгать в воду. Начался какой-то аврал, я не знаю, как по-другому это назвать, у сивичей. Они сильно перепугались, и начался страшный грохот. На самом деле нам не было страшно, потому что мы понимали, что на лодках нам ничего не угрожает. И судно, люди, команда находилась на судне, они лишь почувствовали землетрясение, потому что сброшен был якорь, и от якоря передались вибрации от морского дна на судно.
Zona segura. Ante la alerta de tsunami, se solicita evacuar de todas.
Dele, Noah, dele.
Who recently moved to Arkansas is under arrest in the inexplicable double murder of 2 hikers killed in front of their children.
we were able to take a monster off the streets and bring relief to Clinton and Kristen's precious girls. And to the rest of citizens of Arkansas.
Arkansas State Police charged 28-year-old James Andrew McGann with murdering Clinton and Kristen Brink while they were hiking with their 2 young daughters at Devil's Den State Park. The girls, ages 7 and 9, were uninjured. Police said McGann did not know the couple he's accused of killing.
We're still exploring and determining exactly what that motive was, so it'd be a little premature for us to speak on that tonight.
He just moved to the area and was hired as a teacher at a local school. The horror happened this past Saturday. Police said they found the couple dead on the hiking trail, spurring a days-long manhunt. Witnesses describing the suspect as a white man with a medium build.
Be on the lookout for a white male suspect wearing black gloves, sunglasses.
Authorities releasing this police sketch and later this photo of a person of interest with clothes that match the description. They say he was seen driving a black sedan with a license plate covered by electrical or duct tape. Friends remembering the Brinks as kind and genuine.
I'm really struggling to understand why or how this could happen to such sweet people.
The couple's 2 daughters are now with family members who released a statement saying in part Clinton and Kristen died heroes protecting their little girls and they deserve justice. They will forever live on in all of our hearts. The alleged killer was arrested while he was getting a haircut. The Brinks had recently moved to Northwest Arkansas. The governor of the state said the murder left all of Arkansas absolutely heartbroken. Michael?
So senseless there, Aaron. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
A local immigrant rights group says federal agents performed immigration enforcement raids at 2 local restaurants this morning. The group says at least 12 employees from 2 El Toro Loco restaurants were detained by federal agents in the raids. Fox 4's Jacob Sloan live near the El Toro Loco location in Kansas City, Kansas. Jacob, what are you seeing there tonight?
Well, John, the parking lot's empty. Sign on the door says closed here at El Toro Loco, and the website says that they should be open right about now. Now, that group, Advocates for Immigrants' Rights and Reconciliation, says that 7 employees were taken from this establishment, and neighbors and workers are getting concerned about these type of immigration raids.
What happened here today is a crime against our community. This is not a Kansas value. And this is not the values of a free state, and this is not the American dream that my family has benefited from and that I believe in.
Outside of El Toro Loco and Lenexa, a group called Advocates for Immigrants' Rights and Reconciliation says they never thought it would happen in their neighborhood.
Today, I saw something I never expected to witness in my own community. Federal agents storm into a local business, terrorizing people who are simply trying to build a better life.
This video provided to Fox 4 shows employees being led out of the Lenexa restaurant in chains. The group says Homeland Security investigations agents arrived at the restaurant as they opened, citing a criminal search warrant related to a labor trafficking investigation. The reasons aren't adding up to some faith leaders.
Because anyone who is perceived as Latino or African, wherever they are, at a Home Depot, at a court hearing, at gardening, picking up their kids, or at a restaurant in suburban Johnson County, can be set upon by armed thugs, armed gunmen in masks, dragged into a van and disappeared.
Those who were at the restaurant after the raid say it was an eerie scene.
What we saw wasn't about safety, it was about fear. The scene they left behind told a story. We saw the kitchen still open, a flame burning on the stove, like someone had been taken in the middle of preparing a meal.
AirKC says that 12 to 13 people were detained by the agents. Now they encourage anyone who sees these things happen to report and record the incident.
ICE should expect community accountability, and indeed this will be the way that they will get it.
We reached out to the Department of Homeland Security to confirm their involvement in these operations. Bria, we did not hear back in time for the deadline for this story.
A new world record has been set in the field of reproductive medicine. A baby boy is born in Ohio, and what makes this birth historic? Therius has been developed from an embryo that had been stored frozen for 30.5 years before being implanted and brought to term. The embryo was originally created in 1994 through IVF. It was donated by Linda Archert, who had struggled for 6 years to become pregnant in the early 1990s. And after the procedure, Archert gave birth to a daughter, but 3 additional embryos remained and were kept in storage for decades. As Archer reached menopause, she chose not to discard or anonymously donate the embryos. Instead, she used a Christian embryo adoption agency, which allowed her to select the family. The unused embryos entered a program called Snowflakes, run by Nightlight Christian Adoptions. Lindsay and Tim Pierce, who had been trying to have a child for years, were eventually matched with Archer's embryos through this program. Of the 3 embryos provided, 2 survived the thawing and transfer process, and one of these developed successfully, resulting in Thaddeus's birth. The process was complicated by the age and storage method of the embryos, which were frozen using technology from the 1990s. Specialists at an IVF clinic in Tennessee carried out the procedure and confirmed that all steps went about smoothly, with the resulting child being born healthy. Thaddeus now has a 30-year-old biological sister, and his birth marks a crucial milestone in the history of assisted reproduction.
It's gloves off between U.S. President Donald Trump and former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev, after the latter hinted at unleashing nukes against America if necessary. In a social media post, the former Russian president and Putin's ally told Trump to remember that Moscow possesses Soviet-era nuclear strike capabilities as a last resort. Medvedev warned Trump against playing the ultimatum game, further stating that such an approach with Russia and that such an approach could lead to a war involving the United States. Trump hit back, calling Medvedev a failed former president of Russia, telling him to watch his words, further warning him that he is entering dangerous territory. Medvedev said that Trump's statements showed that Russia should continue its current policy course. Medvedev said, quote, "If some words from the former president of Russia trigger such a nervous reaction from the high and mighty president of the United States, then Russia is doing everything right and will continue to proceed along its own path." Medvedev's social media war with President Trump comes in the backdrop of President Trump reducing a deadline for Russia to reach a peace deal with Ukraine within 10 days. Trump warned strong sanctions against Russia and countries that buy its oil. Kyiv had said Moscow's terms for peace amount to demanding capitulation. President Zelensky has raised repeated calls for tightening international sanctions on Moscow.
A deadly firefight erupted along the Uganda-South Sudan border, leaving at least 4 soldiers dead, according to Uganda's military. The clash, which occurred in Uganda's remote West Nile region, was reportedly sparked when South Sudanese forces crossed into Ugandan territory and refused to withdraw. Uganda's army spokesperson said 3 South Sudanese troops were killed in retaliation after a Ugandan soldier died in the incursion. However, a South Sudanese official claims 5 of their soldiers were killed in what he called a surprise attack. Both countries' militaries have agreed to a ceasefire and promised an investigation into the incident. The 2 neighbors have long disputed stretches of their shared borders, despite a joint demarcation committee working toward a 2027 resolution. While minor clashes have occurred in the past, such deadly confrontations remain
The United Nations has issued a warning that recent cuts in humanitarian aid to northeastern Nigeria is likely to drive vulnerable Nigerians into the arms of Boko Haram, which will further intensify the ongoing security crisis in the region. The United Nations World Food Programme has been forced to drastically limit its operations in the area due to major reduction in international funding. The WFP's operational lead in northeastern Nigeria, Trust Milambo, has warned that Boko Haram will find it much easier to recruit young people who are desperate for basic necessities. And cuts are not only deepening the destitution and the risk of hunger, but are also crippling local economies. So with the aid sector shrinking, local employment and economic opportunities are in a steep decline, further increasing the pool of potential recruits from militant groups. The United Nations and relief agencies have warned that this situation risks undoing years of security and ongoing economic gains in the northeastern part of Nigeria. Boko Haram, that began as a fundamentalist movement, escalated pretty quickly to violent insurgency in 2009 and has since been responsible for widespread violence, about abductions and the displacement of almost over 1 million people. Our correspondent Louisa Olani has sent us this report from Lagos in Nigeria. Listen in.
The World Food Programme has warned that drastic cuts to humanitarian aid could push desperate Nigerians into the arms of Boko Haram militants, with funding shortages forcing the organization to ration and now halt food aid. Over 1 million displaced persons face starvation, a situation that could make it easier for Boko Haram to lure hungry and vulnerable youths, escalating insecurity across the region. Various reports point to malnutrition already crippling 40% of children under 5, and over 150 donor-funded clinics may close soon. As the scarcity hits, the need for urgent aid is there to prevent a humanitarian catastrophe and curb a full-blown resurgence of insurgent activities. From Lagos, Nigeria, Louisa Olani.
The cholera crisis is escalating in Western Central Africa, putting over 80,000 children at grave risk as the rainy season begins. Outbreaks in the Democratic Republic of Congo and Nigeria are spilling across borders, with Chad, Ghana and 6 other nations already battling epidemics, while 5 more countries are on high alert. In the Democratic Republic of Congo alone, over 38,000 cases and 951 deaths were reported in July, with children under 5 bearing a quarter of the infections. Kinshasa's hospitals are overwhelmed, with fatalities spiking to 8%. Meanwhile, in Chad, 55 suspected cases, including 4 deaths, have erupted at a Sudanese refugee camp where overcrowding and contaminated water fueled the outbreak. UNICEF warns that floods, displacement and crumbling water systems are creating a perfect storm. Without urgent action, this could become the region's worst cholera crisis in years. For vulnerable children, it's now a fight for survival.
Canada will officially recognize the State of Palestine in September 2025, the Prime Minister announced Wednesday, aligning with a growing international push to support Palestinian statehood amid the ongoing crisis in Gaza. Carney said Canada's move would take place at the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly.
For the reasons I cited earlier, Canada intends to recognize the State of Palestine at the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly in September 2025. This intention is predicated on the Palestinian Authority's commitment to much-needed reforms, including commitments by the Palestinian Authority's President Abbas to fundamentally reform its governance, to hold general elections in 2026 in which Hamas can play no part, and to demilitarize the Palestinian state. Canada will increase its efforts in supporting strong democratic governance in Palestine and the contributions of its people to a more peaceful and hopeful future.
Over 140 countries already recognize Palestine, but Canada's decision will signal a notable policy shift, reinforcing calls for a two-state solution grounded in peace and democratic principles.